have not heard about this, apparently there were protesters that stormed Trump Tower. Now, these protesters are a part of Jewish Voices for Peace. You have heard about them before. You've seen them participate in other protests as well. They literally have on t-shirts that tell you exactly who they are. Now, they have protested under the Biden administration, and now they're protesting under the Trump administration. They are calling for the release of Mahmoud Khalil, the student that we were telling you about that has the green card that was taken by ICE and apparently is in Louisiana somewhere. Let's get into that protest at Trump Tower, and then I'm going to show you how Harris Faulkner gets this incredibly wrong. Check it out.
Officials have arrested nearly 100 people after a crowd of protesters stormed the lobby of Trump Tower in New York City. They're demanding the release of Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian activist, a graduate student at at Columbia University. He is at risk of being deported after he helped lead protests against the war in Gaza at the university last year. Homeland Security officials have accused Khalil of being a Hamas sympathizer. Let's go right now outside live at Trump Tower with CNN's Omar Jimenez, who is on the scene. Omar, give us the latest.
Yeah, so Boris, about 100 people were arrested as part of this protest that took place inside Trump Tower behind me on multiple levels, 2 different levels of that main sort of lobby entrance to the tower here, as we understand from police. And they were protesting on behalf of Mahmoud Khalil. Jewish Voice for Peace was the group that was leading these particular protests that we saw. And when we first got to the scene, we saw dozens of protesters in zip ties being loaded onto buses, where they were taken to central booking, as we understand from New York police. But the chants that we heard from supporters that even gathered on the outside of some of these barriers that police put in place to keep crowds sort of at bay were things like "Fight Nazis, not students," and protesting on behalf, again, of Khalil, who is still being held in ICE custody as those legal proceedings play out as well. We spoke to one of the organizers of Jewish Voice for Peace about why they wanted to come out here. And to them, they said they did not want the First Amendment entrenched on, which is what they believe Khalil was doing over the course of leading some of the protests we saw out of Columbia University. But also they wanted to show solidarity from the Jewish people as well. As those were the words that one of the organizers told me as we spoke to her, as some of her protesters were being loaded onto these buses.
So there have been a number of times they participated in protests after October 7th, and I think almost everyone they were arrested. So they're used to this. But notice how many times he explains who they are. He says that they're Jewish Voices for Peace. You know, he said they wanted to give a perspective, you know, from the Jewish community, how they feel about the First Amendment, which obviously I keep telling people this is a First Amendment issue. And even if you don't agree with what Mahmoud Khalil did, it could be only a matter of time when it's something that you do agree with and it's, you know, that's attacked as well. So that's how I want people to really take a look at this. So again, he's telling you who this group is and why they are there. That's important when we get to Harris Faulkner.
No violent incidents in regards to the arrest themselves. Once they were taken into police custody, there did not seem to be any resistance. We did not hear of any resistance from police as well, but definitely a protest that grew to over 100, as we understand from both organizers and police, took place inside Trump Tower, organized in just a matter of hours and happened very quickly. As we understand from a law enforcement source, the protesters initially walked into the building with jackets on, and then when they undid their jackets, it revealed the red shirts that represented the Jewish Voice for Peace. But again, a protest that resulted in about 100 arrests. No serious charges expected outside of things like trespassing of that nature. But again, a moment where organizers tell us they wanted their voices to be heard in support of Mahmoud Khalil.
Omar Jimenez live for us in Manhattan. Thank you so much, Omar. Brianna?
Joining us now, CNN senior national security analyst Juliette Kayyem. So Juliette, over 120 people entering Trump Tower, a law enforcement official telling CNN at the height of this. Tell us a little bit about that security setup there now that it's not Trump's official residence.
So just remember, this is the national security advisor. Just keep that in mind, who she is, okay?
Yeah, so I'm surprised by this. I would have assumed that just given the public nature of Trump's commercial activities, it would be very difficult to have 100 people come. It was clearly a secretively planned protest, and they were arrested, as they should be. They trespassed, but they were also nonviolent, and this country has a long tradition of nonviolent protests. We'll see what happens in the courtroom, or what's decided about them. I have no doubt that there will be increased surveillance and security around Trump's commercial entities. And this is the interesting thing about Trump, without getting into whether he should or shouldn't do it. And we saw this with Elon Musk with the Teslas. Because they've broken down the distinction between their public roles and their private commercialization, monetization roles, you are seeing these protests touch them in their commercial space. We saw this with Elon Musk and attacks on Tesla, as well as now this protest. Donald Trump cannot close down Trump Tower. It's a commercial space. It's a residential space. And so they are sort of dealing with, I think, in some ways, the consequences of that merger of monetization and policy and the First Amendment.
So that's typically how protests work. Like, it's not uncommon for the commercial space to be what's confronted. It was just really interesting here how she's trying to make this she's trying to make it seem like it's an outlier, as though this hasn't happened before in the past. And I'm going to show you an example of that as well, that you guys are very familiar with if you studied history in any way, shape, or form. But things aren't always what they seem, because when we go over to Harris Faulkner, I want you to hear how she describes the protesters. Now, you just saw all of that. Okay. They have on T-shirts that tell you exactly what organization they're part of. And listen to how she discusses these protesters. Check this out.
So you hear them chanting, "Free Mahmoud, free them all." I'm wondering, Ari, who are they all? And if the world is watching our nation right now, and they know us as a bastion of free speech, so on and so forth, when you hate, when people feel under threat because of what you're saying, that's actually not protected speech.
Check this out. So we have signs here. Again, this is right here. She's seeing exactly what we can see. Opposing fascism is a Jewish tradition, right? Look at the T-shirts. Not in our name, right? Okay, so Jewish Voices for Peace. Okay, so what Harris Faulkner is trying to do, and other commentators are trying to do this as well, is they're trying to say, oh, well, he said, free Palestine and free that. And I watched the videos. OK, he didn't say anything different than I heard a lot of other people say over years, not just after October 7th. OK, so now they're trying to say, and I warned you guys about this, that criticizing Israel, right, that's hateful, or that's anti-Semitic. Thus, that means that it's hateful. Or saying that the Palestinian people should be free. Remember the whole from the river to the sea thing? Then but it was okay for Israel to say from the river to the sea, like all these types of things, right? So they're trying to say, well, then that's hate speech. So then that's not protected by the First Amendment. So you got to go. Keep in mind, it depends on who the country is, and it depends on the issue at hand. Because when it's Israel that you're opposing, oh, God, it's hateful. We got to crack this down. All this hate speech, right? But some of these same networks sat right there while there was hate speech and while there were killings towards Black people, hateful rhetoric that was used towards Black people, which they aired right on their shows. And they didn't want it condemned in this way, shape, or form. So I said this once again, if this is really about protecting people who are supposedly marginalized in this country, then that should be universal. It is not universal. It is mainly for Israel, because our politicians take money from the Israeli lobby, and thus that's really who they are working for. October 7th, after October 7th, has really showed people's ass. It really has. If you have this disdain and you have a problem and you think that that's hateful rhetoric, you say you have problems with this type of rhetoric, why don't you have that same type of energy and passion towards hate groups that we have right here in the United States that have hateful acts against people who are Black? Why don't you have that same type of energy against the KKK? Why don't you have that same type of energy against neo-Nazis in this country? Because that's not what it's really about. I have been trying to explain this to people over and over again. This whole idea of if you say something bad about Israel, well, then that's anti-Semitic. Everything is anti-Semitic now. That is an old trick that has been used over and over and over again. And people truly believe, they said, well, it says in the book and da-da-da. There's a lot of things that are written in the Bible that I don't see people stand up for, okay? A lot of things. It's really interesting how people can cherry pick what they want to pick to make it fit their agenda. This is why some people have a problem with religion. Listen to what else she goes on to say.
That's right.
And look at some of the signage in here. I mean, they hate Israel. They hate Jewish Americans. They are anti-American.
She said they hate Israel. They hate Jewish Americans. She does not even use a brain to realize that the protesters are Jewish Americans. Does she not even know what Jewish Voices for Peace are? She doesn't even know what she's talking about. These are the people that are sitting on corporate media, ladies and gentlemen. These are the people that they tell you are supposed to be news. I have told you time and time again, these people are not journalists. They just sit there and read a teleprompter in front of them or the papers that are handed to them in the morning. They ain't doing no damn research. I don't never see these people get out of the studio and go talk to the people in the street. They run away from those people as they sit up in their high penthouse apartments in Manhattan. These people are out of touch. They've been out of touch, but they like to take a check. And that's how they get that job. And that's how they get to sit there. How do you not know this? How can you be this dumb? Now she's telling people that they're not Jewish Americans.
I'll make two big points here. One, I'm going to start with the speech facade, the myth that this is about speech. What happened to Mahmoud Khalil had nothing to do with speech. It has everything to do with creating an encampment that is where Zionists are prohibited, where Jewish students are not allowed to walk on their own campus. These are crimes. These are deportable events. These are things that we would never tolerate. As for all
that was not what happened. And anybody who went there to Columbia University, like Status Quo went there, Cornell West went there, they did not tell them that they could not walk on campus. Do you see how the lies that are spreading by mainstream media? This is why people have stopped watching mainstream media. This is why people have walked away. You guys just spread lie after lie and so much propaganda. I am challenging the American people to walk away from the lies, to walk away from the propaganda, and to focus more on independent media. These people, they are basically aligning with the State Department. They are aligning with the alphabet letter agencies. They want you to believe the propaganda that the government wants you to believe. I am challenging all of you to open your mind and to do your own research. I'm sorry, it's hard to get through this.
these people who are now in Trump Tower, I hope that this administration will do what the Biden administration did to the January 6 people who walked inside the Capitol. They have the technology, get their faces, match it up with the database, and if any of them are non-citizens, every one of them is trespassing. They all should be deported from this country, too.
But wouldn't they be trespassing anyway if they are causing people to fear?
Listen to this. He said they all should be deported. They're Jewish. They're American. They're all Jewish Americans. Does he not realize that? So everybody mark this moment. This is Fox News calling for the deportation of Jewish Americans. Now, I noticed something. You don't see the ADL trying to jump in and push back against that, do you? No, because the ADL don't like them either because they don't support the Zionist agenda. Think about that.
There are people who pay to live in that residence. There are businesses on that floor of the lobby. This is not a safe situation. If you are Jewish in that building, do you feel safe? And read those signs. Fight Nazis, not students. So does that make the rest of us in America Nazis? What are they even doing right now?
Harris Faulkner, honey, you are delusional as hell. Delusional as hell. And you can see it here as well. Again, she doesn't even realize these are American citizens.
I refuse to believe they're all students. They're coming from, wherever they're coming from with
none of these people said that they were students. You see this? I refuse to believe they're all students. Jewish Voices for Peace is an organization. It's not just students. They don't do no research. These people are not journalists.
Refuse to believe they're all students. They're coming from, wherever they're coming from with pre-printed T-shirts. There's some money behind this, Lisa, and there's no doubt about that because we've lived through this before. So this is what open borders potentially can bring you. I can't believe everybody's here on a student visa and or a green card in the crowd, or that they're all American citizens. I think we have to find that out. And where it is applicable, as Ari has said, get them out.
So you heard it here, folks. You heard it here first. Here is Harris Faulkner calling for Jewish Americans for you to get them out of the country. She's saying, get them out. She said, this is what happens with open borders. Really? It gives us Americans who were already here? They came in with pre-printed T-shirts. That's how organizing works. I mean, I'm sure when you go to a concert, don't you have the opportunity to buy pre-printed T-shirts? There's some money behind this, you guys. It's an organization. There's a lot of money behind you. It's embarrassing. That clip on X that has just been going around. People are like, oh my God, is she really this dumb? And I want to take you back to a time because, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to show you something, okay? Check this out. This is from the History Channel, so I probably can't play it. But look at this. Reflections on the Greensboro lunch counter. You know what's happening here? This is a sit-in during the Civil Rights Movement, right? So all these guys, they're sitting in here at a diner, and they said, we're not going to move unless you serve us. Why am I showing you this? Because a lot of things that people are pointing their fingers about, the way that people are talking about protesters today, peaceful protesters today. I just want you to remember some of those same people applaud all the protests that happened during the Civil Rights Movement. Not during that time. During that time, the Civil Rights Movement was not popular. But later on, people begin to say, oh, MLK had a point. We look back at what happened during the Civil Rights Movement, and this helped Black people in this country. There's still a lot of work to be done, but it led the pathway there. And I just wanted to show you this image because how quickly people forget. People forget that Black people that were sitting in diners, sit-ins, boycotts, which Bernie don't really want to mention, like this type of thing, boycotts, protest, disrupting businesses. This was a commercial space. This was disruption. And yet they show this to you through history class all throughout the years of school. And this is how Black people fought for civil rights in this country. And you see people right now occupying spaces for Gaza, for what happened to Mahmoud, and also because of the genocide in Gaza. And they're saying like, this is ridiculous. This is terrible. They're traitors. They don't like it here. They need to get out of the country. So it's always good to go back and revisit history. Because I sat up there and I watched cops drag and punch and kick peaceful protesters who weren't doing anything but just standing there or just sitting there. Have we really come far in this country as far as we think that we have? And of course, you go back to the people who are the elites, and you go back to the mouthpieces, that is corporate media, who keep us in this type of division. Because when I say that things are not what they seem, don't forget that your information, it comes from corporate media, most of it. They control the narrative. And as long as they have a handle on the narrative, they can have a way of controlling the masses. They can have a way on controlling you. Because if they convince you that nothing like this has ever happened before, and you don't do your own research, it's easy to believe it. So people say we're going forward in this country. This is why I say, no, we're going backwards. Imagine what they would say if these types of protests, the civil rights protests, were happening today. I want you to think about that. When you hear about the way they talk about the people protesting for Mahmoud or for Gaza, I want you to think about that. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.